All right, everyone, send our attention up front for Moody's capstone.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Before we begin, I'd love us to take 3 deep breaths and then a bow. And for those who don't go to Naropa here, this is usually how we start every class. So you can go at your own pace. So the majority of you know this about me, but it just helps for me to say that I stutter. And so you'll hear me click my lips or repeat or block, or at times tremor my lips. And I'll invite you, when that happens, to use it as a mindfulness cue. So when you see me struggle, you can breathe your support to me, and that helps me. So you all know how obsessed with poetry I am. This is no surprise. And I'd like us to start with a collaborative approach. There's a poem that has quite literally saved me over and over again. And it's become a definitive ground for me, a companion that I return to. So I'm going to recite it twice. The first time, just allow yourself to receive the poem. The second time, I will ask you to reflect on what came up for you. It's a short poem by John O'Donohue titled Fluent. I would like to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. I would like to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. I'd love to hear from a couple or 3 folks what stands out to you, a word, a phrase, or a reflection. And you can just speak up. Carried, all right. Surprise, all right. Flow. Relief, yeah. So here the poem starts with, I would like to. This means the poet is already telling us that he does not live like this, right? So there's a desire. And then carried by the surprise, I think those 2 words are very important. Why not pushed by the surprise, or moved by the surprise, or held in place? But you're sort of carried along. And then when we think of the word surprise, John could have written carried by the joy, or by the beauty, by the insistence, or the determination of its own unfolding. But here there is an invitation to be surprised by how you move along through life. And then at the end, its own unfolding. So here there is an invitation to inquire about what's going on rather than sort of determine about how we want to live. And so 4 short lines can become such a portal for self-discovery. And it briefly points to this feeling that here I am on this earth, and I have a life ahead of me, and I would like to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. I am willing to bet that when you find yourself by a creek or a river, this poem might come to mind, and so the river can become a teacher in this way. One important thing about the title of this poem, Fluent, for people who stutter, in the stuttering community, we talk about fluency as what we would like to achieve or become. And yet a river is fluent, or speaks because of the rocks in its way, right? And so fluency becomes a lot more than just a quiet river that streams by, but because of what stands in its path, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. So rivers are teachers, and so are poems. What does poetry mean to us? It's survived so long across the world's cultures. You could say it's a form of artistic expression. You could say it's something high-browed academics do in their fancy study halls, or it's a dramatic form of feeling. Or you could say poetry is a luxury. And of course, you might remember Audre Lorde, who says poetry is not a luxury, it is a vital necessity of our existence. It forms the quality of the light within which we predicate our hopes and dreams toward survival and change. First, made into language, then into idea, then into more tangible action. What's often left out from this quote when people quote Audre Lorde, and this was an essay she wrote, is that the beginning of the quote says, "For women, then, poetry is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity of our existence." So a poem here becomes a form of protest or a plea or a prayer. It's a way to say, we are here and we exist. So a poem points to the complexity of experience without defining it or pinning it down. It is what is felt but cannot be seen. It is ungraspable. And a poet wrestles this feeling or this idea onto a page, which is just a suggestion of what's there. In Saved by a Poem, which Giovannina recommended I read, thank you, Kim Rosen writes, "Poetry is the language of the soul." And it is through language that we get to explore and describe what it is for us to be alive here today. The poet Galway Kinnell says, "Poetry is somebody standing up, so to speak, and saying with as little concealment as possible what it is for them to be on this earth at this moment." But let's get to the root of the word. The word poetry comes from poesis, which means to make or to create. And what are we creating? Something beautiful of the life we have, hopefully. Not something ambitious or productive, but something full of wonder and awe. It helps us inhabit a place of curiosity and gratitude, and that becomes a vehicle to digest our grief. And so it is no surprise that what defines our culture today dates back to epic poems. Our scriptures are just epic poems. They're these large poems that were recited by the bards, the minstrels, the prophets. And they almost all urge the same thing. They ask us to recognize our impermanence, to recognize the beauty of existence, and to remember that we are each other. In a way, the scriptures of the past remind us to love wholly and to tell the truth. And it's all done through poetry and imagery. And that makes sense because a poem at heart is a metaphor for living. I would love to live like a river flows. And just because I love words here, the word metaphor means to carry across. So it almost becomes a bridge. So in this way, we transpose ourselves onto the world we see around us, and they become teachers that tell us about who we are or how we can be. And so through a poem, not only do we speak in metaphor, but we reach into a mythology, the mytho-poetic. A poem helps us create a worldview, an origin story. And again, because I love words. A myth is really a story, a parable. It has symbols, emotional movements, and it describes one possibility of how we came to be here. We all know the story of Adam and Eve, right? And that's the story of sin. But what if Eve was actually the mother that created us? Because she wanted to taste the beauty and she was so curious, we actually have an opportunity now to be alive and experience it. There's one Sufi saying that I hear as a poem, and for me it becomes an origin story, a mythology. God says, I was a hidden treasure, yearning to be known. So I became, or I created the universe. So if everything is one, and we're all a single point, then we are, by definition, lonely. And so God was a lonely, hidden treasure and became or created all of us for what other purpose than to companion each other on this earth. This changes the way we see ourselves, and it changes the way we interact with each other. Our whole worldview shifts from then. So before I go any further into this, and you can tell how much I love poetry, and I can truly talk about this for hours, and this will be kind of broad with some depth. I'd like to share a poem that I wrote. And in our first CHR class, we were asked about our therapeutic orientation. How do we show up as therapists? And the way I process my feelings and my thoughts is through poetry. And so my therapeutic orientation began with the metaphor of a seed. As we're taught in Buddhist terms, we all contain an inherent brilliance. And our task or duty is to help each other find that brilliance. So this poem is titled, All Things Bloom. You cannot crack open a heart, no more than you can bend steel or pry open a still pursed blossom. No more than you can peel back the sky or force a seed to sprout by hammering its shell. Some things aren't ready to stand exposed and naked in the light. Some cannot bear the violence of knowing, the insistence of change. All you can do is shine ever on with indiscriminate hope and trust that all things bloom, with determined patience that they will. So how I see myself as a therapist then, and how I see our role as therapists or just as humans, is to be a kind of sun that allows a seed to sprout in its own time, but we cannot force maturation. We cannot force understanding or compassion, because if you were to pry a blossom, it would die. So a poem like this helps us reorient our worldview. It becomes a spiritual practice, a mindfulness practice, and that's really found in almost all mindfulness-based interventions. They all use poetry and quotes from poems in their interventions, in just the way a Zen koan is there to help us awaken. And even if the experience in a poem isn't something you have personally went through, there is still a relatability there. It provides an intimate sense of togetherness. Before I continue, can I get a pulse check? How is this landing with folks? Awesome, great, thank you. Okay. All right, so for the past 3 years, I've done research on poetry and writing as a mindfulness practice or a therapeutic intervention, and I've come up with the 4 A's, which it's fun to come up with something like the 4A's. And they are told here in a linear way, but I don't think they apply in a linear fashion to every poem. So the 4A's are attention, awareness, acceptance, and awe. And all these four, I think, are found in effective poems. And these follow a mindfulness practice. Mary Oliver writes, "This is the first, the wildest, and the wisest thing I know, that the soul exists and is built entirely out of attentiveness." So we start with attention, and when we think about mindfulness, we're really paying attention to what's going on inside of us and what's going on outside of us. And that's usually born from a place of curiosity. Cornfield says, "Attention allows us to truly listen to the sound of the bird, to see the deep glory of an autumn leaf, to touch the heart of another and be touched." So paying attention to the world around us is a way to inhabit reality as it is, without a desire to change it. And in this way, attention allows us to be with our sensations without distraction. When I think of ongoing attention, that then quilts awareness. So if I pay attention now and now and now, it quilts into a wide view of being aware. Not all poems will pay attention to the particular things. Some will widen the lens so we can see ourselves in the web of creation. So from attention in a poem, we go to being aware, and awareness is the heart of our practice, to be continually present and here. And it really has a relaxed sort of attitude. As Adam was saying, it's a bliss state where we can watch the creek or the river and then become aware of what the river is trying to teach us, to let go and to unfold, to get carried by the surprise. DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which was founded from a Zen practitioner, really focuses on awareness in this way, and not just being aware of what's going on, but in holding paradox. As the poet Mark Doty writes, it's the yoking of polarities. And I love that phrase, the yoking of polarities. A poem that does not move us is usually a poem that doesn't feel as complicated as life. So in this way, a poem becomes a kind of DBT intervention where we can sit with paradox, where we can hold the complexity of everything. As the Zen koan asks, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Kim Rosen says, this is a kind of poetic metaphor that is a logical impossibility designed to shatter the limitations of mind. And when the mind becomes shattered in this language, we can then be aware of everything that's going on without projecting what we want onto it. And that then leads us to acceptance. So a poem will pay attention to, the brown wooden floor. And then we are aware of where the floor sits in context to everyone else. And then we come to a place of acceptance, realizing that we don't have the power to change most anything. Acceptance at heart is not resisting what is arising. And a poem in this way invites us to accept what's there. This is used usually in ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. And acceptance and commitment therapy specifically focuses on language. As Dr. Russ Harris says, human language naturally creates psychological suffering for us all. The way we speak about our experience informs us about who we are, and the way we express ourselves creates the world around us. And so if I come to accept my trauma or my suffering or my past or my present, I get to speak about it in a way that reorients my relationship to hardship. See, when we language our experience differently, we get clear on what it is we're trying to express. There's an Arabic saying that says, a vessel spills what it contains. So what you say and what you speak is indication of what you carry inside of you. If you gossip, if you cause harm in your speech, if you're saying things that are not in service of others, that's just indication of what's going on inside your heart. So from acceptance, we go from attention, awareness, acceptance, and then awe. It's hard to speak about awe because it's so large, but you could say it's a state of wonder that we exist at all. I'm currently reading a book about black holes because they're fun and exciting, and there's a lot to learn. But as I was drifting off to sleep, I was just thinking about how in a night sky you can see this constellation of stars. And if it wasn't for the curvature of atmosphere and the way light bends in space-time, we wouldn't be able to see all these stars. And to stand as this tiny human on this one planet, which is a slice in time, and realize that we happened, which is so strange just to be alive, that we happened and most likely we're not the only ones in existence. It invites a place of awe, and then your problems become so small. It doesn't matter any longer who didn't call or text or who left you or who did not leave you. There's a place of awe in which we inhabit the beauty of just being alive. And a poem does that for me. It invites me always back to this place. But it's not just in poetry, reading it, writing it too, and writing itself as a daily practice. I'll go through this next section a bit more quickly. So all I've talked about, and I'm about to talk about, I'm compiling into a book on writing and poetry as a contemplative practice to awaken the heart. Because when I can be in awe of my place in the universe, there can be no reason I want to harm anyone. There can be no reason for any kind of war, violence, or aggression. I grew up in Lebanon, came here several times, came from a broken family, a broken country, and I almost always felt like I didn't quite belong anywhere. And I know that's a universal feeling too. I'm not the only one. But when I write on the page, I feel like I truly belong. That is where I live. That's where my true voice comes out. And I think of the page as my country. And this book I'm working on, current title is My Country is This Page. The word country comes from the Latin word root contra, which means what lays opposite or ahead of you. And so the blank page becomes a landscape we can explore ourselves in, root into, map out who we are and how we got here. When I write, I get to meet my truth. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's really hard to write a lie and then to stare at it and to not feel uncomfortable with yourself. Some people might, and I don't think they're here or on Zoom, so thank God for that. But it's a way to process through your experiences. When I write, I get to admit what's real and present off the press of the heart. And what I can't carry, like grief, the page can hold for me. And in this way, I somatically externalize or expel this hard feeling onto the page, and then I can walk away and be a bit more at ease for that day. I'm going to write about, or not write, I'm going to speak about writing in two metaphors that really help me bring this to heart. One is, I see writing as the archaeology of experience. So as we walk through our lives, we experience things every day, and they become like layers, just like rock striations. Over time, those become heavier and heavier and heavier, and they depress into us. And if we're not processing them, they ossify and become rigid personalities. So the pen becomes a digging tool, and I dig through my experiences to figure out just what happened. And the more I dig through, I find gems from my past, because under pressure, things start to become, you could say, I won't go into this too deeply right now, but sometimes pressure is actually really good. It turns us into who we actually are. And so when I dig through my pen, with my pen, I get to find gems from my past. And these gems are not just sort of stories I carry, but they're teaching me about how my past has shaped me. And then I get to the question of, who am I? Who I am is really a question of relationship. I can't know that I'm in a male body if other kinds of bodies don't exist. I can't say I'm short if tall people don't exist. I can't say I'm a human if plants don't exist. So I do not exist in isolation. I exist in relationship, and the quality of our relationships inform us of who we are. But we often don't tend to the inner relationship to self, which is a very important part of who we are. I find there are 4 general categories for our relationships: to self, to each other, to the ground or the earth, and then to God or consciousness. And if I'm not sitting with my internal experience, I don't get to know who I truly am. Writing is this way of companioning the soul, and the soul companioning me on the page. Okay. One other valuable thing of writing, and I find this with myself and with some clients too, and I'm sure you found it too, is at times we retell the same story over and over and over again, and that story has a grip on who we are. Certainly, we cannot change the past. We cannot change what happened. But we can change how we tell the story of what happened, and that changes entirely how we experience ourselves in the world. So without questioning my relational narratives, I get stuck in a limited view of who I am in this world. When I get to rewrite my story from different perspectives and start to tune it towards awe or praise or empowerment, I find that I step into something I call existential gratitude. I do often find myself in a place of existentially asking questions about, who am I? Why am I here? Life is so hard. Life has no purpose. But when I write and get to a place of awe and process through my experiences, I hold that alongside gratitude that I exist at all. It could have been otherwise. I could have not existed. You could have not existed. So why not tune my pen towards praise that I am here, even though it's difficult? And the last a metaphor I'll share about writing is rooting in and branching out. So a tree, for the most part, branches out as far as it roots in. Writing is a sort of rooting into ourselves so that we can find our own ground, so that we can make sense of who we are and our experiences, so I can refine the way I speak and what I want to say. And simultaneously, I branch out to become a home for others. A tree isn't just a tree, it feeds us, it's a home for squirrels, birds, lots of other creatures. I'll just go off a tangent here and I'll say I really hate when people decorate trees in the wintertime because it's not good for the animals. And they need dark times too so they can sleep and not be inundated by our lights. This was not part of this. I just went off. Something that really grinds my gears. So do not decorate outside trees during Christmas, please. So like a tree, when we become fully matured into our possibility, we hold ground for other peoples to exist around us. And then the quality of my relationship to my internal self on the page informs my quality to my relationship outside of me. If I don't understand the boundaries I have with myself, I won't be able to set them with other people. So in this way, it becomes a really intimate process of understanding who I am and who I want to be. And I'll just say a few words about writing as a mindfulness practice. Guna Ratna, who we studied in mindfulness instruction, says a mindfulness practice is a practice in which you observe your own experience by participating in them. Writing in this way, I observe my experience on the page, I participate with that experience. Poetically speaking, the poet Phyllis Cole Dide writes, mindfulness is keeping our heads and our hearts where our bodies are. This is a very important practice in mindfulness, is that it's not to attain enlightenment or to transcend, but to really be present in the body. And when we write down, that is a somatic experience. If you turn to the page when you're angry, you'll find that you write a lot more quickly and you can't read your own sentences. And that's okay, because it's a way to process through energetically what you're holding on and then to expel it out. You could say it's a way to dance on the page. And for me, personally, writing as a mindfulness practice, because I grew up stuttering so severely, I didn't only not know how to speak, but I didn't know what I wanted to say. By writing down my thoughts and exploring my feelings on the page, I refined my understanding of my experience so that I know how to speak about it. It becomes a way for you to practice your own language and your own expression. Okay, now to the boring part, therapeutic applications. Okay, I'll give a short overview of what the research has said. The first study on expressive writing was done in 1986 by James Pennebaker and Sandra Beal. And they had participants write for 15 minutes for 4 consecutive days about a traumatic or a difficult experience. The control group wrote about superficial things or just things that did not have to relate to their trauma. What they saw from just this very short practice is those who wrote about their traumatic or difficult experiences saw the doctor at half the rate over the next year than those who did not. So it healed the body. They saw a improvement in their immune functioning and a reduction in a broad array of health complaints. Since then, there's been a number of writing studies that have been done. One really cool one has been done on men who lost their jobs. Those who wrote about that experience were more likely to find jobs than those who did not. I think that's pretty cool. But it not only helps us physically, there's been signs that it improves psychological functioning too. And especially when it comes to isolation and loneliness. It has been shown that writing, and not just writing in a journal, but reading poetry too, helps helps us process through being lonely and isolated. One, because you get to companion your soul on the page. Two, because you start to make sense of your experience, and it breeds self-compassion. When you can write down and then take a step back and you become the witness of your own experience, you're much more likely to feel compassionate towards the person that you see on the page. Some applications, I read this. Applications as clinicians. So I will often bring poetry to my therapy sessions, and I'll bring a poem that relates to what the person is going through, and then we'll discuss them. We'll discuss the poem. I often as well encourage clients to write or journal about an experience and then bring it with them to session. And then we can discuss what showed up for them there. At times it helps to write in session, just to see what comes up without having to edit. If you do that as a clinician, I find it's important that you journal with your client, so that it's not you sort of watching them. You get to write too, and then there's opportunity for you to share, and that breaks down a lot of barriers between you and the client. Important things about trauma. When writing about trauma, you may at first, or the people you're working with may at first actually feel more or feel re-traumatized, and they won't feel as good about processing it, and that's because they're revisiting an experience. So to hold that in view of the first day or two will actually be a bit more dysregulating, but the long-term impacts are good. And for those with particularly difficult trauma, the invitation is to write about what happened leading to the event, and then what happened after, before you write about what happened. That way you start to scaffold the experience and create some security and grounding on both sides of the event. Closing remarks. Yes, okay. So one thing I find really helpful for writing is that it helps us cultivate empathy. When I see myself on the page, I understand who I am. And when I understand who I am, I'm less likely to judge. And when I'm not judging, I'm compassionate and I'm trusting, and then I can reach towards empathy. And without a muscle for empathy, I don't think our world would survive. So it's really important that we reach that place, whether it's through therapy, poetry, writing. There are various modalities, but it becomes a way of how we bear witness to the world, to ourselves, which for me is akin to saying a prayer. A poem is a prayer. Writing is a prayer. There are times I'll write letters to God because I'm having a hard time, and then God writes a letter back to me. And yes, this is all imagined, but it truly helps. When I invite my higher self or wiser self to write back to me on the page, I end up feeling a lot easier about my own experience. And not just empathy, writing throughout history has been a way to resist tyranny and resist patriarchal standards and resist oppressive systems, because we hold writing as a truth. And so when we speak ourselves in this way, we change our cultures, we change our world. There's, I think it was here, Ted Kooser, a poet, writes, "I'd like a world, wouldn't you, in which people actually took time to think about what they were saying. It would be, I'm certain, a more peaceful, more reasonable place." He also says, by writing poetry, even those poems that fail and fail miserably, we honor and affirm life. We say, we loved the earth, but could not stay. I think this is the end of all acceptance, is to arrive at a place where we say, we loved this earth, we loved our lives on this earth, we loved each other, and yet we cannot stay. Nothing can actually stay. That's where we then come to a place of awe that we existed at all. I'm going to close with a poem that I wrote my first semester here. I felt so inspired by how we would sit on the floor and cushions and look at each other. And almost immediately you could feel that we sort of knew each other from lifetimes. We all came here for kind of the same reason, to find a place to belong. So this poem is titled The Gift. I've seen your face. I've heard your name. There is a pulsing determination edging you beyond your despair. A melancholic trill singing you awake. I've encountered that something in you made of the same sorrow in me. That grieving question in you looking for an answer in me. That lonesome witness in us, aching to bloom within each other. I feel it too, this tugging endearment, when you sit across from me and tell me your story. When pretense is worn down and all that is left is a universe gazing out onto itself, like nothing spilling into nothing, like darkness folding into darkness, like a black hole distilled to emptiness, and how from it beauty erupts in praise. That you are here alone is holy. That we are here together is the gift. Thank you, everyone.
Great job, Moody.
Thank you.
Before I send you, do you have any thoughts or comments, questions?
That was inspiring to see.
My thought and comment and no question is thank you so very much, Moody. This is Karen.
Hi, Karen. It's good to see you. Thank you.
It's wonderful. This is wonderful. Thank you for sharing and just thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, it was really incredible. It's inspiring. I mean, you wrote me a poem after my little 5 years ago, so.
Mm.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Telling you makes sense to me, which is just,
Mm.
my brother said to me during my presentation. So, wow. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Chris.
also, I really appreciate my own writing in the past, but I haven't done it in a while. this has inspired me to turn to the page and
Mm.
begin writing it.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Moody.
Thank you, Giovanni.
So, such an honor to hear you do this and to see how much you have integrated in your time here with poetry and your therapeutic training and the mindfulness instructor training. Yeah, I'm so happy for you. And also, poetry intoxicates as
Mhm.
well as tells the truth.
Yes. Yeah. It can be an escape in some ways, which helps me in sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
With all the
Thank you.
different ways you can use it, and I find myself thinking about too, like, I like that you read them and then like discuss with them, because I think it can say so much about that person's like brain and the way they think and like
Mm-hmm.
where they're at presently.
Mm.
So therapeutically, I see so many uses.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want like a 10-hour like recording of you reading all of your poems to listen to.
One day. One day. Yeah. It's so interesting that every person projects their own experience onto a poem. So in a group setting or therapeutically, you get a variety of ways that people process poetry. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Love you too. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you. Mm. Thank you, Hannah.
And the other thing that is so striking to me is that I went to Naropa and have studied expressive arts, and often using arts as expressive doesn't necessarily mean you also get like quality.
Right. Yeah.
Something one would want to read or see,
Mm.
right? It's like more for the creative expression and healing modality.
Mm.
And you have married both.
Mm. Thank you.
Like the poems I most want to read in the world and inspire me to be in the world with the heartfelt expressive Save Our Life. And that is an unusual marriage.
Mm.
And I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah. Yes. Not all expressive arts are created equally. Yeah. But they are all accepted without judgment. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
An excellent presentation, Moody. I appreciate the time and the intention that you put into it. You can tell that it is something you are deeply passionate about, and you bring that sense of awe and passion and hope and inspiration into this craft, and that is a felt sense. That, like, this is meaningful and valuable, and you have found beauty in it and want to share that beauty with your community and with your world. And thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and sharing the beauty of the myth and metaphor. I love the sun and the seed metaphor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, you said, I refined my understanding of my experience. I would say indeed.
Thanks.
Very refined. Yeah, thorough presentation. I had a curiosity because of metaphor. You reference like seeds and roots and trees, like writing as a way of rooting us into our own internal ground. I'm curious if there is a metaphorical tree that you resonate with, or that you feel like you embody.
That is a good question. I do love all trees. There is a tree in Salt Lake City, actually, that I have chosen as my tree, or maybe it chose me. And when I go to visit, I'll go and sit in it. It has like 8 trunks that have like, it's a huge tree, and you could tell it's gone through a lot. So I feel like a lot, I feel a lot like that tree, and yet there are so many places to sit in it because it's so big. And I would hope the poems or the work I do are a place for people to come and sit in this way.
That makes sense to me because you hold a variety of ways for people to sit with and be with you. So
Thank you.
thanks for sharing.
Thanks.